Congratulations to Alex Pixio for winning this month's giveaway of a free character unit. Hi everyone, my name is Tyler and I'm here to help you get into your new 40k army. 40k as a hobby can be very expensive to get into, but my goal with this series is to help you get a full army going without having to break the bank. Before we dive into the list, let's talk about some basic rules that we're going to be using for the list building process here. Our first goal is going to be to keep it affordable and utilize box deals. For everything that we're going to be looking at today, we're going to be looking at it from an MSRP value from Games Workshop themselves. Now, I don't recommend buying everything MSRP from Games Workshop. Often, local hobby stores, eBay, Amazon, things of that nature will have much better deals for the kits that I'm about to show you. Our second goal is that we're going to be making the list in steps, starting at 500 points and working our way up to 1,000 points, 1,500 points, and 2,000 points. Our third rule is we're going to be avoiding Forge World and Finecast. Many Forge World models are often very pricey for the points that they provide you on the table, and the resin used can be hard to work with, especially for beginners. As far as Finecast goes, I just don't think that they're quite as high quality as the plastic models that you can get otherwise. Our fourth goal is to aim to make lists with decent competitive viability. We're going to be trying to make lists that can do well at casual tournaments, in your games with friends, or maybe even get you some wins at major tournaments. Our fifth and final rule is the most important one. Just because I don't mention a model in my list, it doesn't mean that it isn't good. The most important thing that you can do is collect models that you think are cool. There's an entire side of the hobby that has nothing to do with playing, and if you don't like the models you're painting and building, you're not going to get the most out of this hobby. Today we are finally covering the AdMech. The Adeptus Mechanicus are an Imperial faction based primarily out of Mars. They are comprised of technophiles in space who have swapped out their weak, fleshy bodies for cold, hard steel. Their aesthetic is something akin to a Tibetan monk meets Terminator meets steampunk, and they are followers of the Omnissiah, believing that the machine spirit exists within every weapon, tank, and bite. They will go and perform holy rituals to prepare machines for combat, believing that without them, the machine cannot operate. And they kind of have a point because it is working. They will run and operate forges that handle nearly all of the Imperium's manufacturing, making them one of the most essential parts of the entire Imperium. So what are the reasons that you should be considering AdMech for an army? Well, for one, and probably the most obvious, they have incredible sculpts. AdMech have probably the most unmatched level of detail in 40k, from every single model looking phenomenal. They're also primarily a shooting army for anyone interested in that style, but they have respectable enough melee that you won't find yourself being a purely one-phase army like something like Tau might be. The army also often has lots of auras and synergies that make combos feel really good to pull off and also surprisingly impactful. The army does a solid job of playing both secondary and primary games thanks to their myriad of low point value units, and as a Codex army they do have real variety in how you can play the army. Whether you want to have radiation bombing your opponent, you want to have good synergy for your Skitarii, or you want to do something cool with Castellan robots. And as of writing this, every model in the Combat Patrol is seeing at least some level of tournament success. So why should you ever consider skipping the AdMech? Well, anyone who is remotely interested in 40k is going to tell you that AdMech is the most wildly overpriced money-wise army to collect. This is slightly alleviated by them having some units that are much better points per dollar value, but on average, AdMech are the worst points per dollar value in the entire game, and it's not really close. Their low point value also is going to wind up meaning that you are going to spend much more money to get a full army because they are horde based. Add on to that the fact that their best units at this time, and fairly regularly, are some of their most expensive to purchase, and you can really start to see that price bill start to pile up. The models look incredible, but these models also do tend to break very easily as they have a lot of spindly bits. This makes transporting the units rough, as they are at the same time a horde kind of style army that has a lot of models that can be very easily broken. The hobby time that is included with these incredible models is also going to take you a lot of extra time, as there's so many different textures and hard to reach areas on the models, between the metal limbs, the cloth robes, and all the fine little details that are tucked away. They also, from a gameplay perspective, seem to just be a hard army for GW to balance. Either the army has a ton of synergy and they feel incredibly oppressive when played well, or they fall apart at the smallest inconvenience for average play. The army rule for AdMech is Doctrina Imperatives. At the start of each battle round, you can choose an imperative. You can either take the Protector Imperative or the Conqueror Imperative. If you take the Protector, your ranged weapons are going to get heavy, you increase the ballistic skill of ranged weapons in your army, and melee attacks against things that are close to battle line units are going to have -1 to hit. If you take the Conqueror Imperative, on the other hand, all of your weapons get assault, your melee weapons get their skill increased by 1, and each time a model within 6 inches of a battle line unit makes an attack, you get to increase the armor penetration of the attack. For an army rule that sounds on the surface like it's trying to have your defensive style and your offensive style, these both primarily focus on buffing the damage output of your army, either by vastly increasing the damage potential by just purely stacking buffs on buffs on buffs for the ballistic skill and heavy, or by just giving you tons of mobility and extra AP. We're only going to be looking at one list and one detachment today, and that's going to be the Skitarii Hunter Cohort. Their detachment rule just basically says that, hey, if you are a Skitarii model, then you have stealth, and if your opponent is far away, you have cover. It's just a good general defensive boost, as you have a lot of units that are not particularly tough and don't have particularly great saves. So being able to just be in cover, even if you're out in the open, is a nice little benefit. Because of the aforementioned AdMech Combat Patrol having a lot of things that are good at a tournament level, we are unfortunately going to need to buy a lot of these Combat Patrols. They're not my favorite Combat Patrol. I wish that the character was a little bit different, but the overall contents of the box are very solid, as just for the 3 units that you do really genuinely want that are in here, you are already saving a little bit of money. So we're going to go and pick up 2 Combat Patrols for AdMech. This is going to wind up giving us a list with a Tech Priest Manipulus with the Magna Rail Lance to lead the army, and he will be going in with the Skitarii Vanguard so that he can give them a slightly better invuln save, and also just getting in some extra lethal hits. The Skitarii Rangers and the Skitarii Vanguard are going to be given the exact same loadout, with the difference being their specific unit gun of the Galvanic Rifle versus the Radium Carbine. And then for the infantry with the Skystalkers, we're going to have 1 unit of Skystalkers, 1 unit of Sterilizers. The Sterilizers are arguably better than the Skystalkers right now, but because of the way that the points wind up falling, it's a little bit awkward to try to fit 2 units of Sterilizers. We're going to wind up getting an extra unit later, so I wasn't too particularly worried about it. For the mounted units, we're going to be running the 2 units of 3 Cerberus Raiders with Data Tether, and if you really want to try it out, you can switch them over to the other Cerberus unit, and it's totally fine because they're the same points. At 1,000 points, we're going to need to go and pick up a 3rd Combat Patrol of AdMech, which is a lot more than I would initially love to do, because it just feels like it is a lot of money up front. But it does give us a good actual core to the army that we will want for almost all of the AdMech games going forward. We're then also going to go and pick up 1 additional box of Skitarii and 2 Skitarii Marshals. We really are front-loading a lot of the cost here, but that's just kind of the nature of AdMech. With these characters, we're going to have a Skitarii Marshal with the Battlesphere uplink, we're going to have a Skitarii Marshal with the Clandestine Infiltrator, we're going to have 2 Tech Priest Manipulus with the 3rd one not being used, so you can potentially use them for a kit bash or something like that later down the line, and then we're going to have 3 units of Skitarii Vanguard all with the same loadout. Now, these Skitarii Vanguard are going to be led by the 2 Marshals and 1 of the Manipulus. The Rangers can have the other Manipulus. And then we're going to have the 2 units of 5 Sterilizers that I talked about earlier with the 3 units of Raiders. Now, what is interesting about this combat patrol is if you wanted to get more of it, you could theoretically go and pick up a fourth one, and then you could have a unit of the other Cerberus guys. You could have 2 and 2 of the Taraxi, and theoretically, you're not really wasting anything as long as you genuinely want the Scutari, the Taraxi, and the Cerberus. As we move up to 1500 points, we are going to be picking up 2 boxes of Cataphron Battle Servitors, and we're going to be picking up 1 Scorpius Disintegrator. Now, when you are getting these, make sure that you magnetize. You will want this Disintegrator to be a Dune Rider once you get past 2000 points and start having more options. You do not want to lock yourself into this staying a tank forever. Now, nothing about the list here is really changing. The Scutari Rangers are still going to be that backline holder so that they can kind of spread out, give you a sticky objective, and then maybe move up later in the game or continue to screen out your backfield. The Cataphron Breachers are going to be given the heavy arc rifles and hydraulic claws because otherwise they are going to be lacking the tank killing power that this army is currently really struggling with. As the Vanguard, the Sterilizers, and the Cerberus are all fine at killing infantry, but not really at killing any kind of tanks. We're also going to be having the Scorpius Disintegrator with the Ferromite Cannon for the exact same reason. We need more tank killing. Critically, we are going to be taking one of the Tech Priest Manipulus, and we are going to be taking them out of the Scutari Rangers, and we're going to be putting them into the Cataphron Breachers so that we can make the Cataphron Breachers feel even more durable, as they are kind of a core pillar of damage for this army right now. When we look at 2000 points for this army, we're going to do the exact same thing that we just did, and we're going to pick up 2 more boxes of Cataphron Battle Servitors and a Scorpius Disintegrator. Now, if you do magnetize the Cataphrons, you are likely never going to need to buy Cataphrons again, so I really cannot recommend it enough because this is going to give you so much flexibility with these 4 boxes. Other than that, the list itself looks almost identical. The only difference really being that the second unit of Cataphron Breachers are going to be given the torsion cannons and the hydraulic claws, as we're starting to have enough tank killing, but if you really do want to have them go back over to the heavy arc rifles, then you are completely fine with that. It really depends on what you think is the scariest matchups that you are going to run into in your local scene. And that's going to be everything that I have for you for today for the AdMech. With one little caveat. If you are interested in running the Castellan robots, swap out the Cataphron Breachers for the Castellan robots. The price is going to be about the same. The points are going to come out fairly close. You might cut 1 or 2 extra units from the combat patrols, but overall I think this is going to be the best way for you to start AdMech. Now, there is one very noticeable robot chicken shaped piece missing from this list. And that is because that as much as I love the Iron Striders and as great as they currently are, and they are almost a defining part of the lists, they are way too expensive for me to include. It was already a stretch for me to include the Scutari Marshals at a 1 point per dollar, but considering that some of the chickens are below 1 point per dollar, it is unacceptable for them to be considered for this army whatsoever. I don't think it is going to shock anyone at all that AdMech is going to go in the 1050 plus tier, and they are going to be all alone, and I am no longer including the AdMech tier in the tier list. Big shout out to all of my channel supporters who help make these videos possible, such as Alexander Thomas, and everyone else who's been generous enough to support me. If you would like to try and help out the channel, please consider the links in the description where you can either check out the Amazon affiliate link or go support me on Ko-fi. Thank you all for watching.